Hi friends, I'm Chelsea and I am here with my most surprising books of 2024. So I have 10 books here that I want to talk about. These are books that I either had no expectations of, or maybe low expectations, or I just wasn't expecting to love them as much as I did. And these may not be like my top favorite books of the year just because I have so many 5-star reads, but they are books that I really ended up enjoying more than I thought, and books that I would definitely recommend to you. So I'm just going to jump right in and talk about the 10 books that surprised me the most this year. And I'm going to go in order of when I read them. So this first one is all the way back in January, and then the others will just be kind of scattered throughout the year. So the first one is The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. I happened to just mention this book in my last video as well. This was for a book club, so I did not pick it. I didn't really know much about it. I think I had heard of it, but it wasn't really on my radar to read. I had never read a historical romance before, so I really didn't know what to expect. I kind of thought it would feel more like a historical fiction or like a classic almost. And if you see the cover, you kind of think it's just going to be like a trashy romance novel, as my husband puts it. It definitely has like its spicy moments, but yeah, I really just didn't know what to expect. So I was very pleasantly surprised that I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really just fun and cute, and I loved that the female main character was pretty independent and strong-willed. Again, with it being historical, for some reason I thought she was going to be like a wallflower or something, which is kind of silly, but I really liked her personality. I really liked the chemistry between her and the male main character, and there was some good growth and character development and depth between the two of them, and also a lot of really funny, witty banter. It was just a really cute time overall, and made me want to check out more historical romance. So that was a fun little introduction to this genre of books that I had never read before. The next one was kind of early on in the year as well, and this is Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. So going into this, I definitely felt intimidated. First of all, it's a pretty thick one, and I really loved ACOTAR, and so I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy this as much as that. I had also heard that some people love the series, some don't, so I just didn't know how I was going to feel about it. And while it wasn't a 5-star read for me, I think it was like a 4 or a 4.5, so I still ended up really enjoying it. I had heard that the beginning of it is quite confusing, it has a lot of world building, and it takes a while to kind of get into it, but my experience wasn't really like that. I kind of felt hooked pretty early on, didn't really feel that confused. I enjoyed kind of the urban fantasy setting. There's a really compelling murder mystery. We have an ensemble cast here with some political intrigue, just a really interesting world that I pretty much got invested in pretty quickly, and I read this fairly fast for the length of this book. I also listened to it on audio, so that helped. Kind of just ate this up and binged it pretty quickly. I will say I wasn't 100% connected to the characters or the romance, and I didn't love the second book, which that one might show up in another video like this, but more on the negative side of things. But all that to say, I ended up really liking this book a lot more than I expected. I still definitely like ACOTAR as the series more overall, but had a fun time with this book. Okay, the next one is also kind of in the realm of fantasy books that I felt intimidated by. You won't be surprised about probably, but it's The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, the Stormlight Archive. Again, we have a very thick book, even thicker than Crescent City. I know people love this series. My husband specifically wanted me to read this because it's his favorite author, favorite series, and so part of me was like hoping that I would like it because he loves it so much, but also I just knew that it's a lot. It's a whole big series to get into, a lot of world building, very intricate magic system, and just kind of a slow burn with a lot of things going on. It's always kind of daunting to start a new series like that and just get kind of thrown into this world where you absolutely know nothing of what's happening. I will say it's definitely a lot at first. I'm glad that my husband and I were listening to it together because some things were going over my head, and it was helpful to have him kind of like recap some things that happened. And it's definitely a slow burn, but I also was pretty hooked early on. The writing style is very easy and straightforward to get into, even if some of the magic and world building stuff is a little more involved. I just was kind of interested instantly and really enjoyed getting to know the characters, and that's the thing in these books that just gets me. I like all the fantasy kind of stuff, but ultimately I love the characters. I wasn't expecting to become so attached to these characters and this world as I did. And obviously, if you've been watching my videos, you know that I've continued to read this series this year. And so I also wasn't expecting to get as interested and almost obsessed with this series this year as I have. So that was definitely a pleasant surprise. Okay, so I guess we have a theme here of books I was intimidated by, because it's true for this next one. That is Pure Nessie by Susanna Clarke. Another one that is pretty popular. A lot of people love it for the most part. It had been on my list for a while, so I definitely wanted to read it, but I had no idea what it was about, what to expect. For some reason felt intimidated, even though this one is quite short. I think it's more of just the fact that I heard that it's very unique and weird in some ways, and sometimes you don't even know what's going on. So I just didn't know how I would feel about it. I definitely ended up loving this one. Again, I will say the beginning is a little bit to get into. It was a little disorienting, went over my head a little bit, a little confusing, but once I got into that, it started to make sense. I just really enjoyed the ride that we went on in this book. Kind of blew my mind a little bit. I wasn't expecting it to take the direction that it took. I can't even talk about the plot. I'm not talking about the plot of any of these, but especially this one, you really shouldn't know anything about it before you read it. So I'm glad that I went into it not knowing anything, because it definitely surprised me as I was reading. I just enjoyed getting to know this world, this character Pure Nessie, and just kind of seeing where the story would go. Definitely kind of a mystery feel throughout, and a sense of unease, and just uncovering what is wrong and what is happening to this character in this world. I read this book really quickly. It took like 2 days, which it's short, so that makes sense. But I did not want to put it down, and even when I finished it, I was just like thinking about what I just read. So yeah, I know that's kind of vague, but I was very pleasantly surprised by this book, and definitely recommend picking it up if you have not read it yet. And the next one is a book that I don't own, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So this one is obviously very popular on booktube, book talk, and whatnot. And so with those books that are really overhyped potentially, I am always a little wary, just because I don't want my expectations to be too high, because there's definitely been times where I've been let down by very hyped books. So I was a little wary going into it. And then also, I wasn't 100% in love with Circe by the same author, so I didn't know how I would feel about this one. But again, I really ended up loving it. I thought it was just such a beautiful, emotional story, a love story, but just story in general. I didn't know that it was narrated or from the perspective of Patroclus, and I really connected to him as a character, really enjoyed his perspective and kind of his take on the story and on Achilles. I thought this had really good commentary on kind of the effects of greed and power, ambition, war. It was just beautiful. It was a beautiful story, beautiful ending. The atmosphere was great, just very immersive and transportative. I think that's a word. And also a really good audiobook experience. So yeah, I definitely think this book is worth the hype. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Okay, we have another Brandon Sanderson book here. What can I say? So this one is a standalone, that is Warbreaker. And so it's in the Cosmere, but it's a book on its own, hence the word standalone. This wasn't necessarily one that had been really calling out to me or at the top of my list for some reason. Obviously, like the Stormlight Archive and Mistborn are his most popular books or series, and so I wasn't necessarily like dying to read this, but I had been interested and intrigued by it. I also didn't really know anything about it at all. I didn't really even know what the synopsis was, and so when I started reading it, I was really enjoying it. The magic system was really cool. It's very different from that of the Stormlight Archive, but equally as intricate and unique and compelling. I really enjoyed all the different character POVs and kind of the fast-paced, action-packed plot. Actually felt like this one could have been a little longer, surprisingly, because his other books are probably a little too long. I really enjoyed just the reading experience of this. There were some really funny, kind of lighthearted moments, but also more intense and action-packed, heavier moments. It's sometimes really nice just to read a standalone and not have to commit to the rest of the series. This was a really fun one to read. I also did this as a buddy read, which was always a good experience. If you aren't sure about Brandon Sanderson, this might be a good place to start. Either this one or the Mistborn trilogy, I would say. Since this is a standalone, I think it's a great place to start, and it's not too much of a commitment. So that was a really fun experience for me. Okay, so I've mentioned this one before fairly recently, so you might not be surprised by this one either, but this is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. I had said that I was kind of nervous or scared of the content warnings just because there's like a whole page here of the trigger warnings and it kind of bleeds over to the next page. So I was a little worried about that. I've never read a dark romance and that's not necessarily my preferred genre. I don't mind a little spice, but it's not something I gravitate towards a lot. So I was a little concerned going into it. And I will say it definitely is gory, as we have two serial killers as the main characters. And it's definitely quite spicy, but it didn't bother me. So I don't know what that says about me, but I actually really enjoyed it and it was not as bad as I expected. So definitely a pleasant surprise. Again, I keep saying that, but it's true. I really just had a fun time with this. It was quite funny. I laughed out loud a lot. I really enjoyed the two main characters, their romance. There was a little more depth to this than I expected. Definitely not the most deep romance that I've read by any means, but there was a little more there than I was expecting, so that was nice. I just kind of enjoyed the general chaos and intensity of this. It's definitely a fast-paced one and just a very unique premise, I think, with two serial killers who kill serial killers and they meet each other and have this like murder competition pretty much, and then of course fall in love. So yeah, just a really fun premise and a fun ride. This is another one that I read last month in November. This is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, another buddy read, which was fun. For some reason this one, even though I own it, it wasn't necessarily calling out to me. I wasn't like overly excited about picking it up for some reason. It's an older book and it's not as hyped up or popular, which doesn't mean that it's not going to be a good book. It's just the culture of book world sometimes. The older books and the less exciting, shiny ones don't get as much hype for some reason, which is not good. This book, I think, deserves more hype. So all that to say, I was not like itching to pick it up, but I'm glad I did because it was great, and especially great for like fall or even fall to winter. That's kind of the perfect time to read it. I had heard that it was a really good gothic book for the fall and winter. That was my main draw for picking it up. This is another one where I really had no idea what to expect as far as the plot or even the genre. I still don't really know. I definitely had a good time with this one. It has this sort of sense of mystery, this ominous, uneasy feel throughout. It's got a lot of bookish elements, which I really love. Just, yeah, this whole sense of mystery throughout. Really good twist at the end, very satisfying ending. It was a little addicting because you just kind of get little bits and pieces as you're going. I don't think I expected it to be as much of like a mystery. I wouldn't say it's like a fast-paced thriller necessarily, but it definitely has that mystery feel. So I was definitely surprised by this one. All right, I have two more here. I feel like I'm going quickly, but that's okay. So this one actually I also read in November. I guess November was a month of surprisingly good reads. This one is O Caledonia by Elspeth Barker. So this was my blind date with a book from over the summer, and so I had never heard of it before and probably honestly never would have picked it up. I do like this cover, but I just wouldn't have even had any reason to pick it up or probably never would have even heard of it. This is one of the best, least known novels of the 20th century. I guess it's like a modern classic, but apparently it's not that popular. I'm glad that I ended up with it in the blind date because it was really good. I really liked the writing, thought it was really beautiful. Another kind of gothic tale, great atmosphere set in Scotland. This feels like another good kind of wintry read. I really enjoyed just kind of following this character. She's not the most likable character and it's kind of a tragic, bleak story, but a really good character study, I feel like. I just enjoyed the process of reading this book. It was nice to kind of slow down and take my time, even though it's a shorter book. You have to focus a little more since it's kind of older, and I don't read a lot of books like that. I tend to read a lot of books that are kind of just easier to fly through, but this one made me kind of slow down a little bit and think a little more about what I was reading, but it's also not very hard to understand. So it was a good combination of that, I think. Kind of made me want to pick up more classics slash modern classics, I guess. I don't tend to gravitate towards those lately just because I feel like I read a lot of those in high school and college. They're not necessarily the most exciting types of books, but if it's anything like this, there's some depth to them that really makes you stop and think, but also feel some different emotions, and so I really enjoyed that. And then the last one I read very recently and haven't even talked about it in a wrap-up yet. It'll be in my December wrap-up, but that is Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison. This one also wasn't even on my December TBR, but I had been hearing several positive reviews of it lately, and I knew I was kind of in a Christmas romance mood, so I just kind of randomly picked that up. I listened to the audiobook. I have seen these covers a lot around, and for some reason they were never books that I felt like I wanted to read. I guess I don't read a lot of Christmas romances or just like generic romances in general. I felt like it was going to be cheesy or Hallmarky. I definitely judge a book by its cover sometimes, and so that was on me. But like I said, I had heard some positive reviews of it, so that pushed me to pick it up, and it was a really good one. The two main characters are best friends. I don't tend to love friends to lovers for some reason, but I actually really enjoyed this. I felt their chemistry a lot. I was really rooting for them. I loved the male main character. The female main character, she was a little frustrating at times, but I was rooting for her as well and really felt for her. There was definitely more depth going on than I expected, and this has the small town cozy Christmas vibes, which I loved. It was just a really sweet, heartwarming romance, and I definitely am curious about reading some more of her books. I think it's a great kind of contemporary romance to check out if you're hesitant about romances. It didn't feel like cheesy or cliche to me, but it also had that cozy kind of familiar rom-com feeling that I really like and am looking for when I'm in certain moods, especially around Christmas time. So yeah, I'm glad I ended up reading that one. Those are my top 10 most surprising books of 2024. I think I'm also going to do my top 10, or yeah, probably top 10 most disappointing books of the year to kind of bring it down a little bit. That might be my next video. And then again, my top books of the year, which is going to be really hard. Let me know down below what your most surprising books of this year have been. Otherwise, I think that is it for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.